I'm now going to call Stephen Kinnock. Stephen.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and Mr. Frost and Mr. Gove. I just wanted to pick up on a point that you, Mr. Frost, made in your letter to Michel Barnier, where you opened up the possibility of not being committed to a 100% tariff-free negotiation. Have you done a time estimate of how much time it would take your negotiating team and indeed the EU's negotiating team to pivot away from a zero tariff approach to line-by-line negotiations, given that we're 6 months away from ending the transition period?
Well, to be honest, I'm sceptical about drawing any sort of precedent from how long it's taken in the past to do a trade agreement. We're already operating kind of well beyond precedent in every element of this, looking at the timescale. And luckily, we are also operating on the basis of textual precedent that enables us to kind of draw on things that already exist and so accelerate that timescale. So simply because it's taken months or years in other negotiations to achieve a tariffs negotiation doesn't mean that it will in this case. There are many things we have to do in this negotiation that normally take time, and we will have to do very fast. And I'm confident we can do that. So I don't regard it as a practical difficulty. Clearly, there is a policy issue involved there that is significant.
It just seems like a pretty big issue to throw in the middle of. Sorry, have I frozen?
No, there's a problem with our screen. I think we just need to press a button in order to make sure that we don't disappear.
Oh, okay, sorry. Sometimes it freezes.
No. And this mustn't cut into your time, Stephen.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, it just seems like I guess a pretty big hand grenade to throw into the negotiations 6 months before they're due to finish, that you are shifting away from this commitment to zero tariffs. What about business? Have you had conversations with business about the impact of shifting away from a zero tariff approach? What feedback have you had from the business community?
Well, I think we all want a zero tariffs agreement, a zero tariff, zero quotas agreement. That's what we said in the political declaration that we wanted, and we still hope to get it. And I think every business who's observing this negotiation will prefer to have that, as would we. I think the point we were making, or I was making in my letter, was that it's more as a matter of logic. The EU says that zero tariffs, zero quotas are unprecedented and therefore need to have unprecedented level playing field provisions. We're saying, okay, go back to precedented then. Then you won't need level playing field agreements, perhaps. And so far, the answer from the EU has been, actually, we do. We still need them even then. So I guess it leaves me sceptical that level playing field agreements provisions in the EU's eyes are much to do with access, and they're more about control.
Thanks very much. I guess it's also the risk of sounding like you're making empty threats, because I guess the EU knows that given there's only 6 months left and there doesn't seem to have been much consultation with our business community, we wouldn't actually be able to push through on getting a line-by-line negotiation on tariffs. But that's maybe just a conversation for another day. I just wanted to turn to you, Mr. Gove, if I may, relating to Northern Ireland. On the 8th of November, the Prime Minister told a group of Northern Irish businesses that there would categorically be absolutely no checks on trade crossing the Irish Sea. He even told them that if anyone asked for them to fill in such paperwork, they should just throw it in the bin, quote unquote. But last week, you confirmed that checks would indeed be required in 2 airports and 2 major ports. Did the Prime Minister knowingly mislead the British people in November 2019?
No.
So what can you explain the massive disparity then between throw all paperwork in the bin on the 8th of November 2019 to yourself saying last week, there will be checks and significant paperwork going forward. That's a pretty, you've turned on a sixpence there.
The first thing I would say is that we've always been clear, indeed it was the Prime Minister who outlined in the course of the negotiations leading up to the signing of the withdrawal agreement, that we would extend the understanding that Northern Ireland was a single epidemiological zone to making sure that it was a single SPS zone. So it was always the case that there would be additional processes that those who are exporting products of animal origin or other agri-food goods would have to face. It's also the case that the protocol requires us to ensure that goods at risk of going into the EU's single market are identified, and that's why we have a light touch electronic process which will ensure that those companies that are doing trade from Great Britain into Northern Ireland can be monitored in an appropriate way. But there won't be the need for customs infrastructure or checks of the kind that are commonly understood.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and you got injured.